What's up, ProGuides fam? My name is Kangas, and welcome to another ProGuides video. Today I'm going to run you guys through what you need to know in order to play Seraphine. Like always, I do want to mention that if you're really serious about improving, there's only one place you can head to, and that's ProGuides.com. We have a ton of resources like coaches, classes, and even VOD reviews that'll help you get better at League of Legends. With that said, let's get into the content that you came here for, that guide on Seraphine. But one last thing though, remember that this is all still tentative. The numbers are certainly going to change, especially after Seraphine's release, whether they go up or down. Just don't be caught off guard if the minor details are a little bit different upon her release. Alright, so to start things off, let's give you guys a general idea of the kind of champion that Seraphine is. Seraphine is a supportive mid-lane champion. Her kit is very similar to Sona's, but it's clear that she has the necessary tools to be played as a solo laner. To classify her, she's an enchanter, but in spite of her looks, can hold up just fine on her own. Whether that's the best way to play her is still questionable, but she's got enough wave clear and trading power to pull her own weight in the early game. Of course, like any champion, she has her strengths and weaknesses, so let's talk about them. So beginning with her strengths, Seraphine is a champion who has an incredible amount of utility. Seraphine has crowd control, a movement speed aura, a situational heal, and even a lockdown on her ultimate. This is a ton of utility, all packed into one champion. So it's almost like she's your go-to stop for a lone supportive team member. That's not exactly the case, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Without a doubt, Seraphine is a champion that wants to group with her teammates for one reason. She loves to teamfight. Her kit practically revolves around grouping with teammates, and it's clear that you should have one specific goal in mind when playing her. Group up and win team fights so you can progress the game. Similarly to many other enchanters, Seraphine's scaling is definitely on top of the pack. While we'll break down her abilities in a bit, a good example of her scaling is with her passive. Numbers are still subject to change, but the damage on her passive is currently set at a 5 to 20 base plus 7.5% of her overall ability power. In a perfect scenario, you can stack this damage up to 20 times. So in the late game, you're looking at a giant nuke. Aside from her E, all of Seraphine's other abilities have incredible AP scaling, which we'll break down in just a bit. Now let's talk about Seraphine's weaknesses. Like any enchanter, Seraphine is going to struggle with one thing in particular, and that's side laning. While Seraphine can be played as either a mid laner or a support, there are some duties that typically come with playing a solo lane. In many games, especially high elo ones, wave management is a big deal, and ensuring that all three lanes are being farmed is a sure way to allow more players on your team to hit those item power spikes that they're looking for. Inevitably, mid laners can't always A-ramp and group with their team. They eventually have to venture off to another lane and pick up some farm on their own. This is where Seraphine struggles. While her abilities can help her survive ganks in the mid lane because of the short distance between her and her turret, the side lanes are much less forgiving for an overextended player. One exploitable weakness of Seraphine is her weak wave clear early game. While it's not impossible for Seraphine to clear waves, it takes time and more mana for her to cut through minion waves. Breaking freezes can be challenging, and fast pushing can also be difficult at times. Seraphine needs to prep her waves a bit and get them a little lower in health so that it's easier for her to finish them off with her abilities. However, do keep in mind that her wave clear does improve significantly during the later stages of the game. Alright, now let's talk about all that situational stuff we mentioned earlier. Seraphine is situationally the best at her craft, but only if her allies help her out. A lot of her abilities interact with her allies in one way or another. With that said, it'd actually be easier to explain why this is so while we run through all of her spells. First things first, let's talk about Seraphine's passive stage presence. Echo is one part of this passive. Seraphine's basic abilities grant an Echo stack. When she has 2 stacks, her next basic ability will cast twice after a very brief delay. The second cast consumes her stacks, and she also gains stacks when the game begins and also every time she spawns. The second part of her passive is called Harmony. Seraphine's abilities grant her and her nearby allies a note for up to 6 seconds. Allies can hold up to 4 notes at a time. Seraphine's next basic attack will gain 25 bonus range for each note that's active, and they'll also deal 5 to 20 damage based on level, plus 7.5% of Seraphine's ability power. Subsequent notes deal 95% damage, just to make sure things don't get too out of hand. That means when 20 notes are active, you're going to gain 500 bonus range on an incredibly powerful basic attack. Over the course of teamfights, this means that Seraphine will be able to periodically burst down priority targets from a very safe distance away. Seraphine's passive is quite straightforward. Your goal is to survive as long as possible, stack up notes on allies, and make sure to utilize them by basic attacking priority targets when they're in range. Following up, let's run through Seraphine's Q. High Note is a pretty standard bread and butter ability. Seraphine throws a sound wave at a target location, and it expands in a circle upon reaching its destination. Enemies in the area take damage, increasing based on their missing health. This ability is great for clearing waves and is a primary source of Seraphine's damage. With its rather low cooldown, this ability also has incredible synergy with items such as Luden's Echo and Lichbane. Its low cooldown is also great for utilizing her passive, as she'll be able to grant notes to herself and allies very easily with it. Her Q is also going to be a primary wave clear tool. The key to clearing a wave effectively is making sure that you have Echo stacked ready to go so that when you cast your Q, it'll cast twice when clearing the waves. You'll also want to try and either cast your E or basic attack minions beforehand so that they're lower health and you can gain some extra bonus damage. Next up, Seraphine's W, Surround Sound. In a way, this ability is like Sona's auras. When cast, Seraphine grants herself 20% plus 4% per 100 AP, decaying movement speed. While we haven't been talking too much about numbers as they're not necessary to explain abilities, this is a lot. But again, this number can always change. Her allies who are nearby also gain a bonus. However, they instead gain 8% plus 1.6% per 100 AP. Finally, she and all allies are shielded by this ability as well. Currently, the value is at 60 to 120 plus 30% of her AP. While this may not seem like a big number, remember that you're able to potentially shield all 5 of your allies at once with this ability. This is an insane amount of value as you're able to protect your entire team at once, and a shield for all your allies is a great way to circumvent some AoE damage. Now this is where we need to start talking about your teammates though. There's a final part of Seraphine's W. If Seraphine is already shielded, Surround Sound will heal Seraphine and her nearby allies for a percentage of their missing health. If you use your passive, this will allow you to heal on the second cast. When paired with other utility champions, however, Seraphine can access this heal much more easily. While having her as the lone enchanter on a team is definitely a viable option, Seraphine also opens up the possibility of having multiple on the same team. Next is Seraphine's E, which is one of her crowd control abilities. Seraphine fires a heavy sound wave in her target direction. This wave deals damage and also slows enemies hit by it. Already slowed enemies are rooted, while immobilized or grounded targets are stunned. Again, this is a situation where Seraphine thrives with solid team play. If she's able to follow up on an ally's crowd control, the ability is stronger than it otherwise would be. If you're looking for a root, however, Seraphine can manage this on her own. Once again, her Echo allows her to cast this ability twice. Hit them with a first cast and you'll slow them. Hit them with a follow-up, you'll get the root. Understanding which ability you need to expend your Echo stacks on is always important. When you want some extra crowd control, you'll definitely want to use it with Beat Drop. While Beat Drop is a linear AoE ability, it unfortunately has a damage penalty against minions at earlier levels. As a result, Q is going to be your wave clear tool, but you can still use E to help prepare waves for the final cast. However, casting your E as well as your Q to clear waves is going to cost a lot of mana. Finally, let's talk about her ultimate, Encore. When cast, Seraphine projects a captivating force in her target direction. This is also another linear AoE ability cast, but it comes with yet another catch. Every time the ability hits an enemy or allied champion, the travel distance will reset. Thus, you can extend the range of this ability by casting it through your teammates. Hitting an ally also grants them 4 notes immediately. With great teammates who understand this, you'll be able to use this ability very effectively. But with those who aren't willing to cooperate, you'll have to get a bit closer and practice some patience. Anyway, enemies hit by this ability are damaged, charmed, slowed, and revealed for a few seconds. A quick side note about this ability is that if you cast it on an untargetable ally, like for example they use an ability that makes it so enemies can't hurt them, you'll still be able to extend the range with them. However, the ability will miss on enemies who are untargetable. You can also only extend the range once per cast on the same champion. With her abilities covered, let's run through her build. So for runes, you unfortunately don't have that many options on her. The strongest options seem to be Summon Aerie or Arcane Comet and Unsealed Spellbook. While you can opt for more aggressive keystone options, Seraphine typically leans towards very short trades. Summon Aerie and Arcane Comet fit her trade patterns best, each coming with their own strengths. Summon Aerie is more reliable and can also be used to provide more shielding to allies, while Arcane Comet will of course provide some extra damage. However, that damage can be dodged, especially if you're landing your abilities at close to max range. Unsealed Spellbook, on the other hand, allows you to be more creative, and the access to summoner spells is a great option to have whenever a champion doesn't make the best use of other keystones. Thus, 2 cookie-cutter rune pages you can use are as follows: Summon Aerie or Arcane Comet, Mana Flow Band, Transcendence, Gathering Storm, Magical Footwear, and Biscuit Delivery. For the spellbook setup, you can use Unsealed Spellbook, Magical Footwear, Biscuit Delivery, Cosmic Insight with Mana Flow Band and Transcendence. Mana Flow Band seems essential on Seraphine. The extra mana feels so nice to have, and if you opt for other runes out of preference, make sure to at least give it a try once when playing Seraphine. While Seraphine's mana costs aren't actually all too high early on, the issue lies in the fact that you have to cast rather often just to cut through waves. Most of her other runes are pretty self-explanatory though. Runes like Transcendence and Magical Footwear are universally strong, providing free gold worth of stats for very little investment. For items, we suggest choosing 6 items out of the following: Luden's Echo or Archangel's Staff, Ionian Boots of Lucidity, Lichbane, Rabadon's Deathcap, Zoni's Hourglass, Void Staff, Ardent Censer, and Athene's Unholy Grail. Luden's Echo works out pretty well for Seraphine's playstyle since you want to spam your Q during teamfights. It'll provide some extra burst damage, and when paired with Lichbane, can make Seraphine a pretty big threat. On the other hand, you can opt for Archangel's Staff instead, as it'll transform into a Seraph's Embrace, allowing you to shield yourself. This is one way to activate your bonus healing on your W without having to use your Echo to cast on it. Lichbane is an incredible item on Seraphine. You're going to be basic attacking a lot, especially after spreading notes across your team. Tagging an enemy with your passive, boosted up by Lichbane's effect, can easily zone out most carries. Finally, as a utility champion, it's clear that both Ardent Censer and Athene's Unholy Grail are also great options. Seraphine deals plenty of damage, so making use of Athene's is no problem for her. She can provide even more heals by building one. Ardent Censer is also a great option when you have multiple attack speed-based champions on your team. The AoE shield from her W allows her to buff up several teammates at once. Next, it's time to break down how to play her. So first things first is laning. In the early game, your goal as Seraphine is to fish for poke and slowly whittle down your enemies. Seraphine's wave clear isn't amazing by any means. Trying to use abilities to push waves just isn't the most effective way to go about it. You'll want to save your mana for when it matters and go for more aggressive trades when you've got 2 Echo stacks ready. The lower you get your enemies, the more damage your Q will do. Thus, it's in your best interest to try and use the majority of your mana trading rather than pushing. Against champions who repeatedly push waves in, you'll have to do your best to last hit under turret. Remember that you have incredible scaling, and expending a little bit of mana to farm under turret isn't all too bad. As long as you're making sure to trade aggressively when the passive is ready, it's okay to use some abilities while farming, as this will charge up your passive for another quick trade when the lane is even again. Remember that you don't have to make it a goal to solo kill your opponents. Seraphine has a decent amount of safety during the laning phase as well, so saving your W is pretty important because of its long cooldown. You'll only want to cast it when trying to commit for kills, help out your jungler, or as an escape tool. The burst of movement speed should make it easier to avoid any lethal abilities and retreat to your turret. At the same time, you can also use your E to slow down an enemy's advance while trying to retreat. Make sure that while you're playing her, you try and avoid long, extended trades. More aggressive mid laners are going to try and force longer fights, so you'll need to do your best to hit them with your abilities at max range and poke them down first. While Seraphine isn't completely helpless, she's not as mobile as some other mid laners, and taking some bad trades can lead to a rough laning phase. Teamfighting is the most important thing you need to work towards when playing Seraphine. This is where Seraphine shines. You want to play as a backliner, supporting your teammates with utility and constantly throwing out your Q for some DPS. Q is an ability you should be trying to cast off of cooldown. There's no real incentive to hold it, as you'll need to cast something to spread notes across your team. That's another thing you have to be constantly aware of. By stacking up notes on allies, you gain attack range and bonus damage for the next basic attack. With the immense range bonus, you can challenge carries on the enemy team even if they're fed. Through the safety of a range advantage, you can continuously threaten carries with the burst damage from several notes at once. The ability you'll have to be the most careful with is your W. Its long cooldown is a bit unforgiving. With maximum cooldown reduction, you can be more trigger happy with it, but especially in the early game with its starting cooldown set at 26 seconds, you'll need to be thoughtful about its use. The bright side is that the shield timing isn't strict at all. The shield lasts for a few seconds, so that's plenty of time, especially if the fight is already taking place. You have the option of using your W to chase enemies down, but you should only use it this way if you're already up in numbers, or if you're far ahead enough that your team doesn't need the extra shield to win a fight. Remember that if you have 2 Echo stacks, your next basic ability casts twice. W is probably the best ability to extend your stacks for. Given its long cooldown, you'd think that Riot is probably trying to tell us something. You can grant an AoE shield twice in a team fight, but also you'll provide a delayed heal since you'll shield yourself, then cast the ability a second time. Your E and Ultimate are going to be tools you use when you want to lock down enemies. When you notice clumps, or simply need to hit some enemies with crowd control, both of these abilities essentially serve the same purpose. Save your ultimate for catching multiple opponents at once, or instead use it as an initiation tool. Remember, you can cast it through allies to extend the range, so you can essentially initiate fights from a very safe distance in the same way that marksmen like Jhin and Ashe can. Well, that's gonna conclude this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to leave any feedback or comments that you have for us down in the comment section below. Like always though, we appreciate you a lot and hope you can successfully climb the ladder at the end of the season. It's close, so make sure that you check out ProGuides.com because we have tons of resources to help you in your end of season climb. We'll catch you in the next video, but best of luck on Summoner's Rift.